Welcome to Myth and Moonlight, where we journey through stories designed to help you find deep rest and peaceful sleep. I'm Elara, your guide for tonight's adventure into tranquility. Tonight, as you settle in, I invite you to join me on a special journey to a world where time moves differently, where magic exists in quiet corners, and where stories come alive in the gentlest of ways. These precious moments we share are meant to help you transition from the busy world of wakefulness into the soft, nurturing realm of rest. As we move through our story tonight, remember that there's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, and nothing you need to accomplish. This time is entirely yours. The journey ahead is one of discovery and gentle wonder, but also one of deep relaxation and peaceful surrender. Sometimes the most profound experiences come when we simply allow ourselves to be carried along by a story, when we give ourselves permission to rest, to dream, and to restore. So find that comfortable position, whether you're lying in bed or resting in your favourite spot. Allow your body to be fully supported as we begin this shared journey into a world where books hold magic, where midnight brings wonder, and where a special bookshop appears only in those quiet hours when most of the world is asleep. Let's begin by taking a moment to settle in completely. Feel the surface beneath you, supporting your entire body. Notice where you make contact. Your head, your shoulders, your back, your arms, your hips, your legs, your feet, all completely supported. There's a special kind of magic in this moment. The threshold between your busy day and the restful night ahead. In many ways, it's like the threshold of a special bookshop door, a doorway between one world and another, just as our story will. Explore the liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Begin now to bring gentle awareness to your body, starting with your feet. Notice any sensations there, perhaps warmth, perhaps a pleasant heaviness. With each breath you take, imagine that heaviness increasing slightly, as if your feet are becoming too comfortable, too relaxed to move. This pleasant weight is the beginning of deep rest. Now bring that same gentle awareness to your ankles and calves. With each breath, they become heavier, warmer, more comfortable. Any tension that might have been there begins to dissolve, replaced by a soft, gentle relaxation that continues to deepen with each breath. Move your awareness to your knees and thighs, inviting them to relax completely. Feel how they become heavier, warmer, more comfortable with each passing moment. You might notice a pleasant tingling or a gentle warmth spreading through them as they settle more deeply. Your hips and lower back now begin to release any tension they've been holding. With each breath, they sink a little more heavily into the surface, supporting you. Feel how your breath moves in and out, creating a gentle rhythm that helps your entire body relax more deeply. Your abdomen and chest now soften with each breath. Feel your breath flowing in, bringing calm with it, and flowing out, carrying away any remaining tension. Your breathing finds its own natural, comfortable rhythm. Not too deep, not too shallow, just right for this moment. Your shoulders now begin to release downward, away from your ears. Feel how they broaden and soften. Any tightness there begins to melt away, replaced by a pleasant warmth and heaviness. Your arms grow heavy too, resting completely on the surface beneath them. Notice your hands and how they can relax completely. Your fingers might feel slightly warm, or perhaps there's a gentle tingling sensation as they relax. Each finger feels heavy, comfortable, at rest. Your neck relaxes now, allowing your head to be perfectly supported. Feel the back of your head making contact with the surface beneath it. Perfectly balanced, perfectly at ease. Finally, bring your awareness to your face. Allow your jaw to relax, letting your teeth part slightly. Your tongue can rest comfortably in your mouth. Your cheeks and forehead smooth out as any tension there simply melts away. Your eyes feel soft and heavy behind your closed eyelids, resting deeply in their sockets. Take a moment now to scan your entire body, noticing how different it feels compared to when we began. There's a pleasant heaviness, a comfortable warmth, a sense of letting go that spreads from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. Now, as you continue to rest here, begin to deepen your breath slightly. Breathe in slowly, filling your myositis and lungs completely. Hold that breath for just a moment, and then exhale slowly, emptying your lungs completely. Feel how your entire body relaxes even more deeply with each exhalation. Again, breathe in slowly, filling completely. Hold briefly, and exhale slowly, emptying completely. With each breath, you sink a little deeper into relaxation, a little further away from the concerns of your day. As you continue to breathe at your own comfortable pace, I invite you to begin visualizing the setting for our journey tonight. Imagine a quiet city street in the early hours of the morning. The hour is just past midnight and the world has grown quiet. Street lamps cast pools of soft golden light on the cobblestone path. The buildings stand tall and silent on either side, their windows mostly dark. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of distant rain, old books, and something slightly sweet, perhaps cinnamon or vanilla from a late-night bakery. As you walk along this quiet street, you can hear the gentle tapping of your footsteps on the cobblestones, creating a soothing rhythm. Occasionally, you hear the soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze passes through the trees lining the street. Feel the cool, smooth cobblestones beneath your feet, the gentle touch of the night air against your skin. The temperature is perfect, cool enough to feel refreshing, but warm enough to be comfortable as you walk. Your body feels light yet grounded, moving forward with ease and without hurry. A sense of peaceful anticipation surrounds you. There's nowhere specific you need to be, nothing specific you need to do. You're simply exploring this quiet, beautiful street in the gentle embrace of night. With each step, you feel more at ease, more at home in this peaceful setting. The soft glow of the street lamps creates pools of warm light and gentle shadow. As you move from one pool of light to another, you feel a subtle shift, as if each step is taking you deeper into relaxation, deeper into the story that's about to unfold. In this quiet moment, between the busy day behind and the rest ahead, you're reminded that transitions can be beautiful, just as day transitions to night, just as wakefulness transitions to sleep. There's beauty in the in-between spaces, in the thresholds we cross. You have permission to enjoy this threshold, this gentle transition. You're exactly where you need to be. There's no rush, no need to hurry the process. You can allow yourself to enjoy each moment, each breath, each step along this quiet street. And as our story begins to unfold, remember that you can relax more deeply with each word, with each breath. You can allow the story to carry you along without effort, without trying, simply receiving and resting as we journey together. Now, let us begin our journey to the Midnight Bookshop, where time unfolds differently and where stories hold magic beyond imagination. clock tower at the end of Luminous Lane chimed once, marking the first hour past midnight. Oliver Knightwood lifted his head from his own book, his finger marking his place on the page. The sound of the distant chime always brought him a peculiar comfort, a gentle reminder that he existed in a world where time still mattered, even during these quiet hours when he felt most removed from it. His small apartment, above what appeared to be an abandoned storefront, was comfortable in its simplicity. Bookshelves lined every wall, reaching from floor to ceiling, each shelf brimming with volumes of every size, colour and age. A soft lamp cast a warm golden glow over his reading chair. An overstuffed armchair upholstered in deep blue fabric that had long ago faded to a softer shade that reminded Oliver of twilight. Oliver was a man of indeterminate age, not quite young but not quite old either. His hair, once dark as midnight, now showed streaks of silver at the temples, giving him a distinguished appearance that suited his quiet, contemplative nature. His eyes were a remarkable shade of blue-grey that sometimes appeared to shift colour depending on the light. The book he was reading, or the thoughts occupying his mind. He wore what he always wore, comfortable trousers in a deep charcoal grey, a soft white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a waistcoat in deep burgundy that matched the bookmark he used faithfully in whatever book he happened to be reading. Around his neck hung a curious pendant, a small silver key on a long chain that occasionally caught the lamplight and seemed to glow with a light of its own. Setting his book aside, a volume of ancient poetry he'd read countless times before, Oliver rose from his chair and stretched, feeling the pleasant pull of muscles that had been still for too long. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath his feet as he moved to the window, pulling aside the heavy velvet curtain to gaze down at the empty street below. Luminous Lane appeared ordinary enough during daylight hours. Shoppers would move from the bakery to the florist to the small cafe on the corner, rarely glancing at the empty storefront beneath Oliver's apartment. The sign that hung above the door was weathered to the point of illegibility, the windows covered with thick paper from the inside, preventing any curious gazes from peering in. To all appearances, the shop had been closed for years, but appearances, as Oliver well knew, could be deceiving. He checked his pocket watch, an antique piece with constellations etched into its silver case. The time was 2:38 a.m. Soon then, with practiced movements, he returned to his bedroom and changed into fresh clothes, nearly identical to those he'd been wearing, except his waistcoat was now a deep forest green. He combed his hair, splashed cool water on his face, and reached for a ring of keys that lay on his bedside table. Unlike ordinary keys, these were crafted of unusual materials. One appeared to be made of pale wood, another of something that looked like amber, a third of dark stone veined with silver. The largest was made of a metal that seemed to shift between copper and gold depending on how the light struck it. Oliver handled them with reverence, slipping them into his waistcoat pocket, where they made a soft, musical sound when they touched each other. His preparations complete, Oliver descended the narrow staircase that connected his apartment to the shop below. With each step, the staircase seemed to grow slightly wider, the air around him changing subtly, becoming richer, somehow filled with the unmistakable scent of old books, leather bindings, ink, and something else, something magical that could never quite be named. At the bottom of the stairs, he faced a plain wooden door. He removed the large copper gold key from his pocket and slipped it into the lock. As he turned it, the key seemed to hum with a low, pleasant felt more than heard. The door swung open silently, revealing darkness beyond. Oliver stepped through and closed the door behind him. For a moment, he stood in perfect darkness, breathing in the special scent of the bookshop before it awakened. Then, with a soft word spoken under his breath, lights began to appear, not all at once in a sudden glare, but gradually, one by one, like stars appearing in the thus evening sky. First, a small lamp on the counter near the front of the shop flickered to life, its flame dancing inside a shade of coloured glass that cast patterns of light and shadow across the worn wooden floor. Then candles in wall sconces began to glow, their light gentle and warm. Hanging lanterns suspended from the ceiling on chains of varying lengths illuminated the higher shelves, revealing the true nature of the space. What had appeared from the outside to be a small, abandoned storefront was, in reality, a vast, labyrinthine bookshop that seemed to defy the physical constraints of the building that contained it. Bookshelves stretched into the distance, creating corridors and small reading nooks, some reaching so high that rolling ladders were necessary to access the uppermost shelves. The ceiling, when visible, appeared to be made of glass that revealed not the night sky above London, but something else entirely. A sky filled with stars in constellations Oliver had never seen in the waking world. The wooden floor beneath his feet was smooth and warm, polished by the passage of countless feet over what must have been centuries. Here and there, comfortable chairs and small tables created inviting spaces where readers could sit and lose themselves in the books they discovered. Oriental rugs in rich, deep colours defined these spaces, their intricate patterns seeming to shift slightly when viewed from the corner of one's eye. As the shop fully awakened around him, Oliver felt what he always felt in this moment, a profound sense of homecoming, of rightness, of being exactly where he was meant to be. He ran his fingers along the edge of the nearest bookshelf, feeling the smooth, warm wood respond to his touch like a living thing. The clock on the wall, a curious piece with 13 hours instead of 12 and 3 hands instead of 2, showed the time as 3 a.m. exactly. The Midnight Bookshop was open, though no customers ever entered through the front door. They found their way to Oliver's shop through other means entirely. His first task, as always, was to walk the entirety of the shop, greeting it like an old friend. This ritual never took the same amount of time twice. Sometimes the bookshop felt smaller, more intimate, and other times it expanded into seemingly endless corridors of books. Tonight, it seemed to be in an expansive mood, revealing rooms and alcoves that Oliver hadn't seen in weeks or even months. He walked slowly, never rushing, allowing his fingers to trail along spines of books as he passed. The books seemed to respond to his touch, some quivering slightly as if in recognition, others remaining still but emanating a sense of patient waiting. Oliver knew every book in his shop, though even he couldn't say exactly how many there were. The collection had a way of changing, books appearing exactly when they were needed, others temporarily vanishing, only to reappear months later in an entirely different section. In one corner, he found a collection of astronomical texts that gleamed with a soft silver light. In another, cookbooks that emanated the faint scents of the dishes described on their pages. There was a section of travel books whose pages, when carefully opened, released the sounds of distant places, the crash of ocean waves, the bustle of foreign marketplaces, the haunting calls of unknown birds. As Oliver completed his circuit of the shop, he finally arrived at the front counter, made of dark, polished wood and worn smooth in places by countless elbows and hands. The counter held a large leather-bound book with blank pages, an inkwell filled with ink that shimmered with subtle iridescence, and a quill pen made from a feather Oliver had never been able to identify. He opened the blank book, dipped the quill, and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. As the ink dried, it shifted from black to a deep blue that matched the night sky. Below the date, he put, open from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., though these hours were more suggestion than rule. The Midnight Bookshop operated according to its own understanding of time. With his preparations complete, Oliver settled onto the tall stool behind the counter and waited. The shop was quiet around him, but it was a living sort of quiet. The subtle creaking of wooden shelves adjusting themselves, the occasional soft flutter of pages turning of their own accord, the whisper of book covers brushing against each other as volumes shifted to make room for newcomers. Outside, luminous, Lane remained empty and still. To passers-by, if there had been any at this hour, the bookshop would still appear closed and abandoned, but to those who needed it, to those for whom the perfect book waited somewhere among its shelves, the Midnight Bookshop now glowed like a beacon in the darkness. The previously blank sign above the door now clearly displayed its name in elegant script. Nightwood Books, purveyors of extraordinary volumes. It was, Oliver thought as he settled more comfortably on his stool, going to be an interesting night. The air had that particular quality it sometimes had, a thickness, a richness, a sense of anticipation that told him someone important would find their way to his shop before the night was through. All he had to do was wait and be ready when they arrived. In the gentle quiet of the shop, Oliver's breathing slowed, becoming deep and regular. The familiar sense of paper, ink, leather, and that indefinable something that was simply the smell of books surrounded him like a comfortable blanket. The soft golden light from the lamps and candles created pools of illumination among deeper shadows, giving the shop a dreamlike quality that never failed to bring him a profound sense of peace. As he waited, Oliver found himself reflecting on his role as keeper of the Midnight Bookshop. He had come to it decades ago. Exactly how many years, he could no longer say with certainty. Time moved differently here. He had been young then, but not too young, old enough to have experienced loss and longing, joy and sorrow, enough of life to understand what the books in his care could mean to those who found them. He remembered his own first encounter with the shop clearly. A heartbroken young man wandering the streets of London well past midnight, unable to sleep, unable to find peace following the death of his mother. He had turned down an unfamiliar lane and seen a light burning in a shop window. The sign had read, Nightwood Books, and something about that name had drawn him inside. The elderly shopkeeper had greeted him with a nod, as if expecting him, and without a word had led him to a secluded corner where a single book lay open on a small table. "This one has been waiting for you," the shopkeeper had said, and left him alone with it. Oliver had sat and begun to read, and in reading it, found not just solace but understanding. The book, a slim volume bound in soft blue leather, had contained a story that spoke directly to his grief, that put into words feelings he had been unable to articulate, that showed him a path forward through his pain. When he had finally looked up, hours seemed to have passed, though the clock on the wall showed that only minutes had elapsed. The elderly shopkeeper had been watching him from across the room, a knowing expression on his lined face. "How much for the book?" Oliver had asked, reaching for his wallet, though he had very little money to spare. "The book is not for sale," the shopkeeper had replied. "It has served its purpose, but I have a proposition for you, if you're willing to hear it." That proposition had changed the course of Oliver's life. The previous keeper of the Midnight Bookshop had been waiting for his successor, had recognised in Oliver the qualities needed: compassion, understanding, a love of books and the stories they contained, and something else, something rarer, the ability to see the magic in ordinary things, to believe in possibilities beyond the visible world. The transition had not happened immediately. Oliver had apprenticed at the shop for 7 years, learning its rhythms and secrets, discovering how to listen to the books and understand what they needed, how to guide seekers to the volumes that awaited them. And then, on a night much like this one, the old shopkeeper had handed him the ring of keys, placed a silver key pendant around his neck, and simply vanished, leaving Oliver as the new keeper of the Midnight Bookshop. A soft chime from the clock on the wall drew Oliver from his reminiscence. 20 minutes had passed. The shop remained quiet around him, but the quality of that quiet had changed subtly. There was a heightened sense of anticipation, a feeling that the bookshelves were rearranging themselves in preparation, shifting certain volumes forward, concealing others, creating the perfect path for whoever would soon arrive. Oliver rose from his stool and moved to the front window, glancing out at Luminous Lane. It remained empty, the cobblestones gleaming faintly in the light of the street lamps. But then, a movement at the far end of the lane. A figure had turned the corner and was walking slowly toward the shop, their steps hesitant, uncertain. From this distance, Oliver couldn't make out details, whether the approaching person was young or old, man or woman, but it didn't matter. They were coming to the Midnight Bookshop, which meant they were seeking something, whether they knew it or not. And somewhere among the countless volumes on his shelves, the perfect book was waiting for them. Oliver returned to his place behind the counter, straightened his waistcoat, and waited. The approaching footsteps grew louder, then paused just outside the door. There was a moment of hesitation. There always was. And then the sound of the doorknob turning. The door swung open, bringing with it a brief rush of cool night air, and a young woman stepped into the shop. She was perhaps in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style, and eyes that showed evidence of recent tears. She wore practical clothes, trousers, a simple shirt, a jacket that appeared slightly too large for her frame. Her gaze moved around the shop with a mixture of wonder and confusion, as if she wasn't entirely certain how she had come to be there. "Welcome to Nightwood Books," Oliver said softly, his voice gentle so as not to startle her. "Please come." The young woman's attention snapped to him, surprise evident on her face. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't expect the shop to be open at this hour." "We keep unusual hours," Oliver replied with a small smile, "especially for those who need us." She took a few more steps into the shop, the door swinging closed behind her of its own accord. The soft click of the latch catching seemed to startle her, and she glanced back before returning her gaze to Oliver. "I'm not sure why I came in," she admitted. "I was just walking, trying to clear my head, and then I saw your shop and—" She trailed off, looking around again at the seemingly endless shelves of books stretching away into the distance. "It's much bigger than it looked from outside." "Yes," Oliver agreed simply. "It often appears that way to first-time visitors." He stepped out from behind the counter, moving unhurriedly toward her. "My name is Oliver Nightwood. I'm the keeper of this shop." "I'm Emma," she replied. "Emma Caldwell." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Caldwell." "May I ask what brings you out walking at such a late hour?" Emma hesitated, looking down at her hands, which she had clasped together as if for comfort. "I couldn't sleep," she said finally. "I've been having troubled dreams lately, and tonight was worse than usual, so I thought some fresh air might help." Oliver nodded, recognizing the restlessness in her, the seeking. "Perhaps there's a reason your walk brought you here," he suggested. "The Midnight Bookshop has a way of calling to it those who need it." "The Midnight Bookshop," Emma repeated, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time. "That's an appropriate name, considering the hour." "Indeed," Oliver agreed, "though midnight is merely when we begin our preparations. As you can see, we're fully open now." He gestured to the shop around them, where the lights seemed to have brightened slightly, as if in welcome. Emma's gaze followed his gesture, taking in the countless books, the comfortable reading nooks, the warm golden light that filled the space. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I've never seen so many books in one place before, not even in the university library where I work." "You're a librarian?" Oliver asked, interest colouring his tone. "An archivist, actually," Emma corrected. "I work with rare manuscripts and historical documents, or at least I did, until recently." A shadow passed over her face. "The university is cutting funding to the archives department. In 3 months, my position will no longer exist." "I'm sorry to hear that," Oliver said, and he truly was. He recognised in her the same love of books and knowledge that had drawn him to the Midnight Bookshop all those years ago. To lose work that you care about is always difficult. Emma nodded, blinking rapidly as if fighting back tears. "It's not just the job," she said. "It's the manuscripts themselves. Some of them are so fragile, so unique. Without proper care, they could be lost forever. All that knowledge, all those stories." She trailed off, looking around the shop again. "Sorry, I didn't mean to burden you with my problems." "Not a burden at all," Oliver assured her. "In fact, I think you've come to exactly the right place." He considered her for a moment, then asked, "Would you like some tea while you browse? I keep a pot brewing for visitors." Emma's expression showed surprise again, but she nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." "Make yourself at home," Oliver told her, gesturing to the shop at large. "Feel free to explore. The shop can be a bit labyrinthine, but you won't get lost, I promise." As Emma began to move tentatively toward the nearest bookshelf, Oliver returned to the counter and disappeared through a door behind it. The small, back room contained a tiny kitchenette where an ornate copper kettle was gently steaming on a hot plate. He prepared 2 cups of tea, adding a spoonful of honey to each, and returned to find Emma already absorbed in examining the books on a nearby shelf. "Earl Grey with honey," he said, offering her one of the cups. "It's my preferred blend for the early hours of the morning." Emma accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the fragrant steam before taking a small sip. "It's perfect," she said. "Thank you." Oliver watched as she returned her attention to the books, her free hand moving along the spines, pausing occasionally to pull one part way out and read the title. There was a reverence in the way she touched the books that told him more about her than words could have. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. No one came to the Midnight Bookshop knowing exactly what they sought. Emma shook her head. "Not really. I'm just..." She paused, considering. "I suppose I'm looking for answers, but I don't even know the questions." Oliver smiled. "Sometimes the right book finds us before we even know what as long as you need it to be." With that, he retreated to his place behind the counter, settling on his stool and sipping his own tea as he watched Emma begin to wander deeper into the shop. He knew better than to guide her too directly. The Midnight Bookshop worked in its own way, leading visitors along paths uniquely suited to them. His role was simply to be present, to answer questions if asked, to provide comfort and reassurance when needed. Emma moved slowly through the shop, her initial hesitance giving way to growing wonder as she discovered the true nature of the place. She paused at a section where books on astronomy were shelved, her fingers brushing the spine of a large volume bound in midnight blue leather with silver stars embossed on its cover. As she touched it, tiny pinpricks of light appeared, forming constellations across the cover. Her soft gasp of surprise carried clearly to where Oliver sat. She moved on, finding herself in a section dedicated to ancient civilizations. Here, the books emanated subtle scents, desert heat and spices from a volume on Egypt, sea salt and olive oil from a text on Greece. Emma lifted one book from its shelf, a heavy tome bound in terracotta, coloured leather, and as she opened it, the soft sound of distant drums seemed to emanate from its pages. Oliver watched as she closed the book carefully and returned it to its place, her expression a mixture of confusion and delight. She was beginning to understand that the Midnight Bookshop was no ordinary bookstore, though she likely couldn't yet comprehend its true nature. As Emma ventured deeper into the shop, the bookshelves seemed to shift around her, creating a path that led her toward a secluded corner she might not otherwise have discovered. Here, the light was softer, coming from a single lamp with a shade of green glass that cast a gentle, peaceful glow over a small reading nook. A comfortable armchair, upholstered in faded burgundy velvet, sat beside a small table of dark wood, polished to a soft sheen by years of use. On the table lay a single book. From his vantage point, Oliver couldn't see the book clearly, but he didn't need to. The Midnight Bookshop had made its choice. That book, whatever it might be, was the one Emma Caldwell needed to find tonight. He watched as she approached the reading nook, her steps slowing as she noticed the solitary book. She set her now empty teacup on a nearby shelf and moved to stand before the table, looking down at the book with an expression of curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, she settled into the armchair and carefully lifted the book. It was of moderate size, bound in soft leather the colour of warm honey. There was no title on its cover, no author's name, just a simple design embossed in gold. A key much like the one Oliver wore around his neck. Emma glanced up, her gaze seeking Oliver across the shop. When their eyes met, he offered a small nod of encouragement. Whatever the book contained, it was meant for her. With a deep breath, she opened it and began to read. Oliver couldn't see the words on the pages from where he sat, but he didn't need to. Each book in the Midnight Bookshop revealed itself differently to each reader, showing them exactly what they needed most. For some, it might be a story that reflected their own struggles and triumphs. For others, it might be forgotten knowledge, rediscovered at exactly the right moment. For still others, it might be a glimpse of possibilities yet to come, paths not yet taken. As Emma read, her expression changed subtly, surprise giving way to deep concentration, then to something like recognition, and finally to a profound calm that smoothed the worry lines from her forehead and softened the set of her shoulders. Time passed differently in the reading nook, as it often did in the Midnight Bookshop. What might have been minutes or hours in the outside world expanded here, allowing Oliver busied himself with small tasks around the shop, straightening books that didn't really need straightening, dusting shelves that were somehow never dusty, making a fresh pot of tea that would be ready when Emma eventually emerged from her reading. He knew better than to interrupt. The magic of the Midnight Bookshop worked in its own time, in its own way. Finally, Emma closed the book, resting her hands on its cover for a long moment, as if reluctant to break the connection. When she looked up, her eyes were bright, but not with tears this time. There was a new clarity in her gaze, a certainty that hadn't been there when she entered the shop. She rose from the armchair, the book cradled carefully in her hands, and made her way back toward the counter where Oliver waited. "This book," she said as she approached, her voice soft with wonder. "I've never read anything like it. It's as if it was written specifically for me." Oliver smiled. "In a way, perhaps it was," he said. "The books here have a certain awareness of what readers need." Emma looked down at the volume in her hands. "It showed me a way forward," she said. "A path I hadn't considered before. The manuscripts I've been working with at the university, they don't have to be locked away in an archive that's losing its funding. They could be digitized, made available to everyone. I could start a project to preserve them electronically, seek private funding instead of relying on the university." Her eyes shone with excitement. "The book showed me how to do it, step by step. It even named specific foundations that might support such work." Oliver nodded, unsurprised. The Midnight Bookshop's magic always worked in practical ways, showing possibilities that were genuinely achievable, not mere fantasies. "It sounds like a worthy project," he said, "one that would preserve the knowledge you care about while making it accessible to many more people than can currently see it." "Yes, exactly," Emma agreed. She looked down at the book again, then back at Oliver. "How much do I owe you for this? It must be very valuable." Oliver shook his head. "The book is not for sale," he said, echoing the words the previous shopkeeper had spoken to him so many years ago. "It has served its purpose." Emma's face fell. "But I haven't finished reading it," she protested. "There's so much more information I need to fully understand the plan it's outlining." "You've read exactly what you needed to read," Oliver assured her. "If you tried to continue now, you'd find the remaining pages blank." With a skeptical expression, Emma opened the book again, leafing through the pages. Her eyes widened as she discovered the truth of his words. After the last page she had read, the rest of the book contained nothing but empty pages, waiting for some future reader's needs to fill them with different words. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at Oliver in confusion. "When I was reading, there were hundreds of pages filled with text and diagrams. The Midnight Bookshop operates according to its own rules," Oliver explained gently. "The books here show themselves differently to each reader, offering exactly what that person needs most. What you read was meant specifically for you, Emma Caldwell, at this specific moment in your life." Emma looked around the shop with new awareness, taking in the countless books, the impossibly large interior that couldn't possibly fit within the building's external dimensions, the warm golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This isn't an ordinary bookshop, is it?" she asked quietly. Oliver smiled. "No," he agreed, "it isn't. And you're not an ordinary bookseller." "No," he said again. "I'm the keeper of the Midnight Bookshop. I ensure it's here for those who need it, when they need it most." Emma carefully placed the book on the counter between them. "Thank you," she said, and those simple words carried the weight of genuine gratitude. "I came in here lost and afraid. And now, she took a deep breath. Now I have hope again. I have a purpose. The path ahead won't be easy, Oliver cautioned her. What the book showed you will require hard work, persistence, probably some disappointment along the way. But if you truly believe in preserving those manuscripts and making them accessible to all, you'll find a way through the challenges. I do believe in it, Emma said firmly. It's what I've always wanted to do, really. I just couldn't see how to make it happen until tonight. Oliver nodded, satisfied. The Midnight Bookshop had done its work well, as it always did. Then I wish you every success, Miss Caldwell. Emma glanced toward the front door, then back at Oliver. Will I be able to find this shop again if I need to? It was the question visitors always asked, and Oliver gave his usual answer. The Midnight Bookshop appears to those who truly need it, he said. If your path brings you here again someday, you'll be welcome. He moved out from behind the counter and escorted her to the front door. Outside, Luminous Lane was still dark, but now the faintest hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. Time in the Midnight Bookshop never quite matched the time outside its walls. Thank you again, Mr. Knightwood, Emma said as she stepped over the threshold. For the tea and the book and everything. You're very welcome, Oliver replied. Safe journey home. He watched as she walked away down Luminous Lane, her steps more purposeful now than when she had arrived. When she reached the corner and turned out of sight, Oliver closed the door and turned back to the shop. The book Emma had read still lay on the counter. He picked it up carefully, feeling its weight, the soft texture of its leather binding. The embossed key on its cover caught the light, gleaming briefly before fading. Oliver carried the book deep into the shop, to a special section where returned books waited until they were needed again. Each one contained different knowledge for different seekers. Each one served its purpose in its own time. As he placed the book on its shelf, the clock on the wall chimed 4 times. The Midnight Bookshop's official hours were ending, though Oliver knew it might choose to remain open longer if another seeker happened to wander down Luminous Lane before dawn. He made his way back to the counter, settling once more on his stool. Around him, the shop seemed to exhale softly, as if satisfied with the night's work. A comfortable silence settled over the space, broken only by the occasional whisper of pages turning themselves, the gentle creak of shelves adjusting their positions, preparing for the next visitor whenever they might arrive. Oliver picked up his own book, the volume of poetry he had been reading earlier, and opened it to where his burgundy bookmark held his place. The familiar words brought him comfort, as they always did. In the gentle light of the Midnight Bookshop, surrounded by the magic of countless books, he read quietly, at peace in his role as keeper of this extraordinary place. The bookshop settled around him, warm and alive, filled with stories waiting to be discovered, knowledge waiting to be shared, magic waiting to unfold in the lives of those who needed it most. Outside, the world continued its relentless forward motion, but here, in the Midnight Bookshop, time moved according to its own rhythms, creating a sanctuary for both the keeper and those fortunate enough to find their way through its door. And so, the night passed, gentle and quiet, as nights in the Midnight Bookshop often did. One seeker had found what they needed, others would come in their own time. The books waited patiently, their secrets and stories contained within their pages, ready to reveal themselves when the moment was right. Oliver read on, content in the knowledge that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what what he was meant to do. The Midnight Bookshop was his home, his purpose, his life's work, and in its quiet magic, he had found a peace that few in the world ever truly discovered. The weeks that followed Emma Caldwell's visit to the Midnight Bookshop fell into a comfortable rhythm for Oliver. Each night, as the clock tower at the southern end of Luminous Lane chimed once for 1 o'clock, he would begin his preparations. By 3, the shop would be open, its warm golden light spilling softly onto the empty street, invisible to all except those who needed to see it. Some nights brought visitors, a grief-stricken widower who found solace in a book of poems that seemed to speak directly to his loss, a young student overwhelmed by the pressures of her studies who discovered a volume that taught her techniques to calm her anxious mind, an elderly man nearing the end of his life who sought understanding of what might lie beyond and found a book whose pages shimmered with a light that brought tears of peace to his eyes. Other nights, the Midnight Bookshop remained empty of visitors, though never truly empty. The books themselves provided company for Oliver, their whispers and rustles creating a subtle symphony of sound that he had grown to love over his years as keeper. On these quieter nights, he would often wander deeper into the shop than usual, exploring sections that seemed to appear and disappear according to some pattern he had never quite discerned. It was on such a night, nearly a month after Emma's visit, that Oliver discovered a section he couldn't recall seeing before. The bookshelves here were made of a pale wood that seemed to glow faintly from within. The books they contained were unusually slender, their spines unmarked by titles or authors' names, bound in leather of various hues: deep blue, rich purple, forest green, warm amber. Curious, Oliver reached for one bound in a shade of red that reminded him of autumn leaves. As his fingers touched its spine, he felt a gentle warmth spread through his hand, up his arm, and into his chest. Not unpleasant, but unexpected. He carefully slid the book from its place and opened it. The pages were blank. Oliver frowned slightly. Blank books were not uncommon in the Midnight Bookshop. Many would reveal their contents only to the specific reader who needed them. But the warm sensation he had felt upon touching this one suggested it might be meant for him. As he studied the empty pages, holding the book open in both hands, a curious thing began to happen. Tiny specks of light, like dust motes caught in a sunbeam, began to rise from the pages, swirling in the air before him. They danced and spun, gradually forming patterns, then shapes, then a scene that hovered in the air above the book. Oliver watched, transfixed, as the lights formed the image of a young woman seated at a desk in what appeared to be a modern office. Her face was familiar. Emma Caldwell, the archivist who had visited his shop weeks earlier. In the vision, she was speaking animatedly to 2 well-dressed individuals who listened with evident interest. On the desk between them lay documents and what Oliver recognized as grant applications. The scene shifted, showing Emma in what must be the university archives, carefully handling ancient manuscripts while a photographer documented them with specialized equipment. Then it changed again, showing her presenting to a room full of people, her face alight with passion as she explained something. Oliver couldn't hear the words, but her enthusiasm was evident in every gesture. One final shift showed Emma sitting alone in a small apartment, a laptop computer open before her, her expression one of tired satisfaction as she typed. Behind her on the wall hung a framed certificate that Oliver couldn't quite read, but it appeared to be some kind of recognition or award. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the motes of light swirled once more and sank back into the pages of the book, leaving it blank once again. Oliver closed it carefully and returned it to its place on the shelf, understanding what he had been shown. The book had offered him a glimpse of Emma's future, not a guaranteed outcome, but a possible path that had opened to her following her visit to the Midnight Bookshop. It was a rare gift. Most often, Oliver never learned what became of those who visited his shop, never knew whether the books they found truly changed their lives or simply provided temporary comfort. This vision of Emma's potential future gave him a deep sense of satisfaction, a confirmation that the Midnight Bookshop's magic continued to work in the world beyond its walls. He continued his exploration, moving deeper into this unfamiliar section, his fingers trailing lightly over the spines of the blank books. None of the others reacted to his touch as the red one had, remaining simply beautiful, mysterious objects waiting for their moment to reveal whatever they contained. At the end of the row, a single book stood apart from the others, bound in leather of midnight blue so deep it appeared almost black. It was larger than its companions, and unlike them, it bore a title stamped in silver on its spine, The Keeper's Chronicle. Oliver's heart quickened. In all his years tending the Midnight Bookshop, he had never encountered this volume before. With reverent care, he lifted it from the shelf and carried it to a nearby reading nook where a comfortable chair waited as if placed there specifically for this moment. The book was heavier than it appeared, its weight reassuring in his hands as he settled into the chair. A small lamp on a table beside him glowed more brightly as he sat, casting perfect reading light over the book as he placed it on his lap and slowly opened the cover. The first page bore only the title again, The Keeper's Chronicle, in flowing silver script. As Oliver turned the page, he found himself looking at a portrait, rendered in such detail it might have been a photograph if not for the style, of clothing worn by the subject. A man with a serious expression and kind eyes gazed out from the page, dressed in the fashion of what appeared to be the early 19th century. Beneath the portrait was a name, Thomas Knightwood, First Keeper, 1817, 1863. Oliver's breath caught. Knightwood, the same surname he had adopted when he became keeper of the shop. He had never known it belonged to an actual person, had assumed it was simply part of the role he had taken on. Yet here was evidence that someone named Knightwood had been the first to tend this magical place. The next page contained a brief account of Thomas Knightwood's life before becoming keeper, a scholar and book collector who had discovered the shop much as Oliver himself had, though in a London very different from the modern city. Further, pages detailed Thomas's experiences as keeper, the visitors he had welcomed, the books that had revealed themselves during his stewardship. Oliver turned the pages slowly, absorbing this unexpected history. After Thomas came Eleanor Knightwood, no relation, the book noted, though she too took the name upon assuming the role. Keeper from 1863 to 1912. Then Aruto Knightwood, 1912 to 1957. Then Sophia Knightwood, 1957 to 1986. And finally, a portrait Oliver recognised, the elderly man who had welcomed him to the shop all those years ago. Frederick Knightwood, 1986 to 2001. After Frederick's entry came blank pages, dozens of them waiting to be filled with the account of Oliver's own stewardship. He had never thought to keep such a record, had never been instructed to do so by Frederick before the old man vanished. Yet clearly, the shop itself maintained this chronicle, this history of those who had served as its keeper throughout the busy years. Oliver studied the final entry about Frederick, something caught his eye, a detail he hadn't noticed before. According to the chronicle, each keeper had served until either their death or until they chose to pass the role to a successor. Frederick, however, was noted as having departed for the library in 2001 when he transferred the shop to Oliver's care. The library. Oliver had never heard of such a place, at least not in the context of something a keeper might depart for. Was it simply another name for death, or something else entirely? His question was answered on the next page, though he had thought the remainder of the book was blank. A single paragraph now appeared where nothing had been before. When a keeper's time of service concludes, they may choose to depart for the great library, the source from which all books in the Midnight Bookshop ultimately derive. There, former keepers serve as custodians of original knowledge, tending the wellspring of stories and wisdom that flows out into the world through vessels such as the Midnight Bookshop. This transition is not death but transformation, a passage from keeping one collection to joining the keeping of all collections. Oliver read the paragraph 3 times, a strange mixture of emotions washing through him. Relief to know that Frederick had not simply ceased to exist, wonder at the thought of this great library, and a quiet, peaceful acceptance of what his own ultimate fate might be when his time as keeper eventually concluded. The remainder of the book was indeed blank, waiting for the continuing story of Oliver's stewardship, and someday the account of his own departure and whoever might succeed him as keeper of the Midnight Bookshop. He closed the Keeper's Chronicle carefully and held it in his lap for a long moment, absorbing what he had learned. Then he rose and returned the book to its place on the shelf, knowing it would be there when he needed to consult it again, or perhaps when the time came to record significant events from his tenure. As Oliver made his way back toward the front of the shop, the bookshelves seemed to shift around him. The pale wood section, with its mysterious blank books disappearing behind him as corridors of more familiar shelves took its place. By the time he reached the counter, the shop had resumed its usual configuration, though he knew the section would reappear when the time was right. The clock on the wall showed 4:45. The Midnight Bookshop's official hours were nearly over for another night. Oliver settled onto his stool behind the counter, reflecting on what he had discovered. He was part of something larger and older than he had realized, a tradition of keeping that stretched back more than 2 centuries. The knowledge filled him with a profound sense of purpose. Each keeper had served in their time, had guided visitors to the books they needed, had preserved the magic of this extraordinary place for future seekers. In the gentle quiet of the shop, surrounded by countless books and the subtle magic that animated them, Oliver felt more at home than ever before. The Midnight Bookshop was his place, his purpose, his destiny, not just for now, but in a greater continuum that stretched backward into history and forward into a future he could only glimpse. The clock chimed 4 times. Another night of keeping was complete. Yet Oliver didn't immediately begin the process of closing the shop as he usually would. Instead, he remained on his stool, listening to the breathing of the books around him, feeling the shop settle into its between-time state. Not quite open, not quite closed, existing in that liminal space that was its natural realm. Something was different tonight. The shop wasn't ready to close, wasn't ready for Oliver to return to his apartment above and rest until the next night's keeping began. There was a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that he had learned to recognize over the years. The Midnight Bookshop was expecting someone important, Oliver glanced toward the front door, but Luminous Lane remained empty outside the window. Whoever the shop was waiting for had not yet arrived, or perhaps they would arrive in a different way entirely. Not all visitors came through the front door. Some found their way to the Midnight Bookshop through more unusual paths. Trusting the shop's rhythms, Oliver reached for the book he kept below the counter for quiet moments. A collection of poetry that never seemed to contain the same poems twice, yet always offered exactly the words he needed to read. He opened it at random and found himself looking at a poem about waiting, about the beauty of anticipation, about the spaces between moments where true magic often occurred. As he read, the quality of silence in the shop changed subtly. The whispers of the books grew quieter, as if they were holding their breath. The golden light from the lamps and candles seemed to gather, concentrating in the centre of the shop, where an open area served as a kind of crossroads between different sections. Oliver set his book aside and watched, curious but not alarmed. In all his years as keeper, he had witnessed many unusual manifestations of the shop's magic, each one different, each one serving a specific purpose that often became clear only in retrospect. The gathered light began to pulse gently, like a heartbeat. With each pulse, it grew slightly brighter, slightly more concentrated, until it formed a shimmering column that stretched from floor to ceiling. Within the column, shadows began to appear, taking shape gradually. The suggestion of a human figure, indistinct at first, but becoming clearer with each pulse of light. Oliver rose from his stool and moved closer, drawn by an instinct he didn't quite understand. As he approached, the figure within the light became more defined, tall and slender, with flowing silver hair and features that seemed to shift between young and old, male and female, as if unable to settle on a single appearance. When Oliver stood just a few feet away, the figure opened eyes that glowed with the same golden light that surrounded it. Those eyes fixed on Oliver with an intensity that might have been frightening, if not for the profound kindness they conveyed. "Keeper," the figure said, its voice neither male nor female, but somehow both, resonating not just in Oliver's ears, but throughout his body. "The library sends greetings." Oliver's heart skipped a beat. The library, the great library, mentioned in the Keeper's Chronicle, the source from which all books in the Midnight Bookshop ultimately derived. He bowed slightly, instinctively showing respect to this extraordinary visitor. "I am honoured," he said, surprised to find his voice steady, despite the wonder he felt. "How may I serve the library?" The figure smiled, the expression transforming its features into something of heartbreaking beauty. "You serve already, Keeper, and serve well. The Midnight Bookshop thrives under your stewardship. The books are content. The seekers find what they need." "Thank you," Oliver said simply, warmed by the praise, even as he wondered why a messenger from the great library would appear simply to compliment him, as if reading his thoughts. The figure's smile deepened. "I come not merely to acknowledge your service, but to prepare you. A seeker approaches whose need is great, whose path is difficult. This one will challenge you, Keeper. They will test the limits of the Midnight Bookshop's magic and your own understanding of your role." Oliver frowned slightly. "How will I recognize this seeker?" he asked. "You will know them by the absence they carry," the figure replied, the cryptic words somehow making perfect sense to Oliver, even as he couldn't have explained their meaning to anyone else. "You will know them by the book that calls to them." A volume not seen in the Midnight Bookshop for many years. The figure's form began to shimmer, becoming less distinct as the column of light pulsed more rapidly. Prepare, keeper, be ready. The Midnight Bookshop was created for many purposes, but none more important than the seeker who comes. Before Oliver could ask any more questions, the figure dissolved into motes of golden light that scattered throughout the shop, each one disappearing into a different book on a different shelf, as if the messenger's essence was being absorbed back into the collection it had come from. For a moment, Oliver stood motionless in the centre of the shop, absorbing what had just occurred. In all his years as keeper, he had never received such a visitation, never been given such a specific, if enigmatic, warning about a coming seeker. As the last of the golden light faded, the shop around him seemed to exhale, returning to its normal state of quiet magic. The clock on the wall, which had stopped during the messenger's appearance, resumed its ticking, showing the time as 4:30, well past the Midnight Bookshop's usual closing hour. Yet Oliver knew the shop would not close today. It would remain open, waiting for the important seeker the messenger had foretold. And he, as keeper, would wait too, ready to fulfill whatever role was required of him when this mysterious visitor arrived. He returned to his place behind the counter, but didn't pick up his book of poetry again. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out with that special sense he had developed over the years, feeling the bookshop's mood, its readiness. The shelves were rearranging themselves more actively than usual, books shifting positions, entire sections moving to create new pathways, new connections. The Midnight Bookshop was preparing itself for something extraordinary, and Oliver Knightwood, its keeper, would ensure it was ready when the moment came. Time passed differently in the Midnight Bookshop, especially during these unusual circumstances. Outside, dawn broke over London, but within the shop, the warm golden light remained constant, the sense of night and quiet magic preserved regardless of the hour in the world beyond its walls. Oliver felt no fatigue, no need for the sleep he would normally seek after a night of keeping. The shop's magic sustained him, keeping him alert and ready for however long this vigil might last. He busied himself with small tasks, adjusting the arrangement of items on the counter, brewing fresh tea that would be ready when needed, occasionally walking the ever-changing paths between the bookshelves to ensure all was in order. It was during one such walk, deep in a section of historical texts that hadn't been visible the night before, that Oliver first noticed the change. A book was moving on its own, not the subtle shifting that all books in the shop occasionally exhibited, but a deliberate, persistent movement. It was working its way out from its position, pushing past its neighbours, drawing attention to itself in a way Oliver had rarely seen. He approached carefully, watching as the book, a large volume bound in worn leather the colour of dark honey, finally freed itself from the shelf and hovered in the air before him. Its behaviour was unusual, even for the Midnight Bookshop, suggesting an urgency that made Oliver's pulse quicken. As he reached for it, the book evaded his grasp, floating backward down the aisle as if leading him somewhere. Oliver followed, curious but cautious. The book led him through winding paths between the shelves, some familiar, others newly formed, until they reached a section of the shop he recognised as especially old, the original core of the collection, containing volumes that had been part of the Midnight Bookshop since Thomas Knightwood's time as keeper. Here, the floating book finally paused, hovering beside an empty space on a shelf of especially ancient texts. The gap was precisely the right size for the book, suggesting it belonged there but had somehow been displaced. As Oliver watched, the book slid itself into the empty space once settled, the book's spine became visible, revealing a title in faded gold lettering: The Book of Lost Words. Oliver frowned slightly. He knew most of the volumes in this oldest section by heart, but couldn't recall ever seeing this particular title before. Before he could reach for it, the entire bookshelf began to glow with a soft golden light similar to that which had surrounded the messenger from the library. The light spread to neighbouring shelves, then to the floor beneath Oliver's feet, creating a kind of pathway that led from this spot to the front of the shop. Understanding dawned. The Book of Lost Words was the volume the messenger had mentioned, the one that would call to the important seeker who was coming, and the pathway of light was the route they would follow to find it. As if confirming his realization, the shop around him seemed to settle into a state of expectant stillness. The constant subtle movements and adjustments of the books ceased, the whispering of pages falling silent. Everything waited. Oliver made his way back to the front counter, following the pathway of golden light that now illuminated the floor. As he reached his usual position, the light faded, though he knew it would reappear when needed. The Midnight Bookshop had completed its preparations. Now there was nothing to do but wait for the seeker's arrival. He didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, a sound came from outside. Footsteps on the cobblestones of Luminous Lane, moving slowly, hesitantly, toward the shop. Oliver glanced out the front window and saw a figure approaching through the early morning mist that often shrouded the lane at dawn. The figure paused outside the door, just as Emma Caldwell had, weeks earlier. But unlike Emma, who had shown only momentary hesitation before entering, this person remained still, seemingly frozen with indecision. Oliver couldn't make out details through the misted glass, could see only a slender silhouette wrapped in what appeared to be a long coat or cloak. Trusting the shop's magic, he waited patiently, knowing the seeker would enter when the time was right. Nearly 5 minutes passed before the doorknob finally turned and the door swung open. A young man stepped into the shop, bringing with him a swirl of mist and the scent of rain-washed streets. He was perhaps in his early 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes of such a pale blue they appeared almost silver in the shop's warm light. But it was not his appearance that caught Oliver's attention most strongly. It was the emptiness that surrounded him. Not a physical emptiness, but a kind of absence that Oliver perceived with that special sense he had developed as keeper. It was as if the young man existed in a bubble of nothing, a space where something vital had been removed, leaving only an aching void. The absence they carry, the messenger had said. Oliver knew at once that this was the seeker the library had sent its messenger to prepare him for. "Welcome to Nightwood Books," he said softly, his usual greeting feeling somehow inadequate for this particular visitor. The young man's gaze snapped to him, those strange pale eyes widening slightly, as if he hadn't expected to find anyone in the shop. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to intrude. The door was... that is, I thought..." He trailed off, glancing back at the door, which had closed behind him. "You're not intruding," Oliver assured him, moving out from behind the counter. "The shop is open. Please, come in." The young man took a few tentative steps forward, his gaze moving around the shop with a mixture of wonder and confusion that Oliver had seen many times before. "I don't understand," he said. "I walk down this street every morning on my way to work. This shop has always been closed, abandoned. Perhaps you weren't ready to see it until now," Oliver suggested gently. The young man looked at him sharply. Ready? What do you mean, ready? Oliver chose his words carefully, sensing that this seeker required a different approach than most. The Midnight Bookshop appears to those who need it, he explained. Those who are seeking something, even if they don't know exactly what they're looking for. I'm not seeking anything, the young man said, a defensive edge entering his voice. I was just walking to work, like I do every day. Despite his words, he took a few more steps into the shop, his gaze drawn to the endless rows of bookshelves stretching away into the distance. The absence surrounding him seemed to pulse, to grow more pronounced, as if the shop's magic was making it more visible, not just to Oliver, but perhaps to the young man himself. My name is Oliver Nightwood, Oliver said, changing tactics. I'm the keeper of this shop, and you are? The young man hesitated, as if even sharing his name required too much trust. Finally, he said, Elliot Gray. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Gray, Oliver replied, the formality seeming right for this guarded visitor. May I offer you some tea? I've just brewed a fresh pot. Elliot looked startled by the ordinary nature of the offer, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Yes, thank you. That would be nice. As Oliver moved to prepare the tea, Elliot began to wander deeper into the shop, drawn perhaps by curiosity or perhaps by the subtle magic that waited to guide him to the book of lost words. Oliver watched as he disappeared between the bookshelves, then quickly prepared 2 cups of tea, adding honey to his own as usual, but leaving Elliot's plain, sensing that the young man would prefer it that way. By the time Oliver had finished, Elliot was nowhere to be seen among the nearby shelves. Setting both cups on a small tray, Oliver followed the path he had seen the young man take, moving deeper into the shop. As he walked, the golden light he had seen earlier began to reappear, illuminating the floor just ahead of his feet, guiding him toward the seeker. He found Elliot standing motionless in the ancient section where the book of lost words had returned itself to its shelf. The young man was staring at the shelf as if transfixed, though he hadn't yet reached for any book. The absence around him had grown even more pronounced, a palpable void that seemed to draw light and sound into itself. I thought you might like some tea, Oliver said quietly, trying not to startle him. Elliot turned slowly, his pale eyes unfocused for a moment before settling on Oliver. Thank you, he said, accepting the cup Oliver offered. He took a small sip, then looked back at the shelf. These books, they're very old, aren't they? Yes, Oliver confirmed. Some of the oldest in the shop. They've been here since the beginning. The beginning of what? Elliot asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't really expecting an answer. The beginning of the Midnight Bookshop, Oliver replied simply, nearly 200 years ago now. Elliot's gaze returned to him, more focused now, more present. 200 years? That's impossible. This building can't be that old. The shop exists somewhat independently of the building that houses it, Oliver explained, knowing his words would only add to the young man's confusion, but feeling they needed to be said nonetheless. To his surprise, Elliot nodded slowly, as if this made a strange kind of sense to him, like a story exists independently of the book it's printed in, he murmured, more to himself than to Oliver. Exactly like that, Oliver agreed, pleased by the unexpected insight. Elliot took another sip of his tea, then set the cup down on a nearby reading table. His attention returned to the shelf before him, his gaze moving along the row of ancient books until it settled on the book of lost words. His hand lifted, almost of its own accord, reaching toward the book's spine. That One calls to you? Oliver asked softly. Elliot's hand paused, hovering just inches from the book. I don't know, he said, his voice uncertain. It's just, there's something about it, the title. He squinted, reading the faded gold lettering. The Book of Lost Words. What does that mean? Perhaps you should find out, Oliver suggested. After another moment's hesitation, Elliot carefully slid the book from its place. It came willingly, almost eagerly, into his hands. A good sign, Oliver knew. Some books resisted, even when seekers tried to force them. Others practically leapt into waiting hands when the right reader appeared. The book was large and heavy, its leather binding worn smooth by countless hands over centuries. Elliot carried it to the reading table and set it down carefully beside his teacup. For a long moment, he simply looked at it, not touching, not opening, just studying its weathered exterior. It feels important, he said finally, his voice barely audible. But I don't know why. Books often know things about us that we haven't yet recognized in ourselves, Oliver said, settling into a chair across the table from Elliot. They call to something deeper than our conscious thoughts. Elliot glanced up at him, those pale eyes searching Oliver's face, as if looking for signs of deception or mockery. Finding none, he returned his attention to the book and, with visible reluctance, placed his hand upon the cover. The moment his fingers made contact, the absence surrounding him pulsed visibly, like a heartbeat seen through thin skin. Elliot gasped, his eyes widening, clearly feeling something, though perhaps not seeing what Oliver saw. What is this? He whispered. What's happening? The book is responding to you, Oliver explained calmly. It recognizes what you need. I don't need anything, Elliot insisted again, though his hand remained on the book's cover, unable or unwilling to break the connection. I'm fine. Everything's fine. The words sounded hollow, automatic, as if they had been repeated so many times they had lost all meaning. The absence around him contracted sharply at the lie, pulling inward like a wound puckering. Elliot, Oliver said gently, using the young man's first name for the first time. The Midnight Bookshop doesn't appear to those who are fine. It appears to those who are seeking, those who have lost something, those who need to find their way. Elliot's eyes filled suddenly with tears that he blinked back quickly, his jaw tightening with the effort of control. You don't know anything about me, he said, the words coming out harsher than perhaps he intended. I know that you carry in us absence, Oliver said, taking a risk with the directness of his words. I can see it, feel it. Something important is missing, and its absence has created a void around you. The young man's hand jerked back from the book as if burned. That's not possible, he said, rising abruptly from his chair. You can't see that. No one can see that. His reaction confirmed Oliver's instinct. Elliot was aware of the absence he carried, aware of the void around him, but believed it to be invisible to others. Perhaps it was to ordinary people in the ordinary world, but the Midnight Bookshop was neither ordinary nor of the ordinary world. I see it because it's my role to see such things, Oliver said, remaining seated, trying to project calm in the face of Elliot's distress. As keeper of the Midnight Bookshop, I'm attuned to what seekers bring with them, what they need, what might help them find their way. Elliot remained standing, poised as if to flee, his expression a complex mixture of fear, anger, and, beneath it all, a desperate hope that Oliver's words might be true. The absence around him roiled and twisted, responding to his emotional state. Please, Oliver said softly. Sit, open the book. It called to you for a reason. into his chair. His gaze fell once more to the book of lost words lying closed before him. "What will I find in there?" he asked, his voice small, vulnerable, the defensiveness momentarily set aside. "I don't know," Oliver answered honestly. "Each book reveals itself differently to each reader. Whatever it contains will be what you specifically need to see or understand." Elliot nodded once, a short, sharp movement. Then, with a deep breath, he opened the cover of the ancient volume. The first page was blank, except for the title written in an elegant, flowing script, "The Book of Lost Words." As Elliot turned to the second page, Oliver saw his eyes widen, his breath catch. Whatever appeared, there was clearly not what the young man had expected. "This is..." Elliot began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "This is my handwriting." Oliver wasn't surprised. The Midnight Bookshop's magic worked in mysterious ways, but always with purpose, always with meaning. "What does it say?" he asked gently. Elliot stared at the page, reading silently. His hands began to tremble slightly. "It's a poem I wrote years ago. I thought all copies were gone. May I ask what happened to them?" Oliver inquired, sensing they were approaching the heart of the absence Elliot carried. The young man's pale eyes lifted from the page, meeting Oliver's gaze with naked pain. "I burned them," he said simply. "After Jamie died, I burned everything I'd ever written. Every poem, every story, every journal, all of it. And there it was, the source of the absence, the void, the overwhelming sense of loss that surrounded Elliot like a shroud. Jamie, someone vitally important, someone whose death had led Elliot to destroy his own creative work, to sever that connection to himself and perhaps to the one he had lost. Words hold power," Oliver said softly. "Each one connects us to others, to ourselves, to the world. When we lose words, we lose those connections." Elliot nodded, his gaze returning to the page before him. "Jamie always said my words were a gift," he murmured, "that they could build bridges between souls." A single tear escaped and tracked down his cheek, landing on the open page of the book. "After he was gone, I didn't want bridges anymore. I wanted walls." Oliver remained silent, sensing that Elliot needed to speak, to articulate the loss that had created the void around him. The Midnight Bookshop itself seemed to grow quieter, as if listening. "We met in university," Elliot continued, his voice distant, as if he was speaking from within a memory. "Both of us are studying literature. Jamie was brilliant, could recite entire poems after reading them once, could discuss the most obscure literary theories as easily as the weather." A small, sad smile touched his lips. "He was the first person who ever took my writing seriously. He found a poem I'd written and left in the library by accident. Instead of just turning it in to Lost and Found, he read it, then spent 3 days trying to find who had written it." Elliot turned the page of the book, revealing more of his own handwriting. "He loved this one," he said softly, said it captured exactly how he felt about language, about connections. He began to read aloud, his voice gaining strength as he continued. "Words like bridges span the spaces between one soul and another, each syllable a blank, each phrase a step across the void. We build these crossings word by word, spanning chasms deep and wide. What seems impassable alone becomes a path when shared. I string my words like fairy lights across the darkness their glow. Take my hand, and neither shall be lost. His voice broke on the final line. The absence around him pulsed once violently, then began to change, no longer contracting but expanding, as if the void was being filled with something that pushed outward, seeking space to grow. It's been 3 years, Elliot said, wiping away another tear. 3 years since the accident. 3 years since I burned every word I'd ever written and stopped writing altogether. And how has that been? Oliver asked gently. The not writing. Elliot looked up, his expression haunted. Like slow suffocation, he admitted. Like losing my voice. Like dying a little more each day. But it felt right somehow. If Jamie couldn't have words anymore, why should I? Do you think that's what he would have wanted? Oliver asked. The person who spent 3 days searching for the author of a single poem he found by chance. Pamasupitasi, the question hung in the air between them. Elliot turned another page in the book, then another, discovering more and more of his own lost words. Poems, journal entries, fragments of stories, all preserved somehow in this impossible volume that couldn't possibly contain them, yet somehow did. No, he said finally, the single word emerging like a sigh. Jamie would hate what I've done. He'd say I was wasting my gift. He'd tell me to keep building bridges, even if he couldn't cross them anymore. The absence around Elliot continued to change, filling with something that glowed faintly. Not the golden light of the shop's magic, but something more personal, more individual. Words, Oliver realised. The void was filling with words. Elliot's words, returning to him through the book of lost words. Elliot continued turning pages, reading fragments aloud occasionally, rediscovering pieces of himself that he had tried to destroy. With each page, the glow around him grew stronger, pushing back against the absence, reclaiming space that had been empty for too long. Finally, he reached a page that made him stop, his hand freezing above the paper. This one, he whispered. I wrote this one the day after his funeral, before I burned everything. I thought no one had ever seen it. He read it silently, his eyes moving across the page with painful slowness, absorbing each word as if it caused physical pain. When he finished, he looked up at Oliver with an expression of mingled grief and wonder. The book doesn't just contain the words I burned, he said. It contains the words I never wrote, the ones I would have written if I hadn't stopped. Oliver nodded, unsurprised. The Midnight Bookshop exists in a place where past, present, and possible futures overlap, he explained. It can show us not just what was, but what might yet be. Elliot closed his eyes briefly, struggling with some internal battle. When he opened them again, decision had replaced uncertainty. May I borrow a pen? He asked. Oliver reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew a fountain pen of dark blue glass that shimmered with an inner light. He handed it to Elliot, who took it with reverent care. Turning to the first blank page he could find in the book of lost words, Elliot began to write. The pen moved across the paper with increasing confidence, words flowing from its tip in the same handwriting that filled the earlier pages. As he wrote, the glow around him brightened, pushing back the last remnants of the absence, filling them void with light and language. Oliver rose quietly from his chair and stepped away, giving Elliot privacy for this moment of reconnection with his gift. He moved among the nearby shelves, straightening books that needed no straightening, allowing the young man time and space to write without observation. When he eventually returned to the reading table, Elliot Elliot had filled several pages with new words. The young man looked up as Oliver approached, his pale eyes now bright with unshed tears, but tears of a different kind than before. The words never left, Elliot said softly. They were always there, waiting. I just couldn't hear them anymore. Words are resilient that way, Oliver replied with a smile. They wait for us to be ready to receive them again. Elliot nodded, looking down at what he had written. I thought I was honouring Jamie's memory by giving up writing, he said. But all I was doing was destroying the very thing he loved most about me. And now, Oliver asked, now I think perhaps the best way to honour him is to keep building bridges, Elliot said. To use my words as Jamie believed I could, to connect, to illuminate, to preserve. He closed the book of lost words with gentle reverence. Thank you for this, for everything. Oliver inclined his head slightly. I'm merely the keeper, he said. The Midnight Bookshop is what called to you, showed you what you needed to see. Elliot glanced around, seeming to truly take in his surroundings for the first time since entering the shop. This place isn't normal, is it? He asked, though the question held no fear, only wonder. No, Oliver agreed. It exists, somewhat outside the ordinary world. It appears to those who need it, when they need it most. Will I be able to find it again? Elliot asked, the familiar question of departing seekers. Oliver gave his usual answer. The Midnight Bookshop appears to those who truly need it. If your path brings you here again someday, you'll be welcome. Elliot nodded, accepting this. He rose from his chair, his hand resting on the book of lost words. And this? He asked. Do I take it with me? Oliver shook his head gently. The book belongs here, he said. But the words, your words, those you take with you, they've returned to where they truly belong. Understanding dawned in Elliot's eyes. He lifted his hand from the book, letting it go with what seemed like genuine peace. Yes, he said simply. I think they have. Oliver escorted him back through the winding paths between bookshelves, which now seemed to arrange themselves in a direct route to the front of the shop. As they walked, Elliot's gaze moved wonderingly over the countless volumes surrounding them. So many stories, he murmured, so many words, each one waiting for the right reader, Oliver confirmed, each one holding something unique, something needed. When they reached the front door, Elliot paused, turning to face Oliver. The absence that had surrounded him when he entered was completely gone now, replaced by a gentle glow of possibility. The void had been filled not with what was lost, but with what might yet be created. I'm not sure I understand everything that's happened here, Elliot said, but I know that when I walked in, I felt empty, and now I don't. That's understanding. Enough, Oliver replied with a warm smile. Elliot extended his hand, which Oliver clasped in his own. Thank you, Mr. Knightwood, the young man said formally, for the tea and the book and the words. You're very welcome, Mr. Gray, Oliver responded, matching his formality with a twinkle in his eye. May your bridges reach far and connect many. With a final nod, Elliot turned and stepped out into Luminous Lane, where morning had fully dawned. The street lamps had extinguished, and early workers were beginning to appear, hurrying toward their various destinations. He paused briefly, looking back at the shop, then continued on his way, his steps lighter, his shoulders straighter than when he had arrived. Oliver watched until Elliot disappeared around the corner at the end of the lane. Only then did he close the door and turned back to the Midnight Bookshop, which seemed to sigh around him, settling into a satisfied quiet after the important work it had just accomplished. The clock on the wall showed just past 6 in the morning, far beyond the shop's usual hours. The golden light from lamps and candles was fading now, preparing for the shop's daytime sleep. Yet Oliver felt no fatigue, only a deep, peaceful contentment at having been part of Elliot Gray's healing, having watched as the void of loss was filled once more with words. He made his way back to the ancient section where the Book of Lost Words waited on the reading table. As he approached, the book's cover opened of its own accord, pages turning rapidly until they settled on what Elliot had written during his visit. Oliver bent to read, curious what words had begun to fill the young man's absence. What he found was not a poem about loss or grief, as he might have expected, but one about renewal, about finding voice after silence, about words as seeds that could grow even in the most barren soil. The final stanza brought a smile to Oliver's face. I speak your name into the silence, not as farewell, but greeting, each word a seed planted in your memory, growing toward a light you helped me see. The bridge between us, built of language, stands stronger than stone or steel. Death may part, but words connect, and I am writing still. Oliver closed the book gently and carried it back to its place on the shelf. It settled there with a soft sound of contentment, its purpose fulfilled until the next seeker arrived who needed what it contained. As he made his way toward the staircase that would take him to his apartment above the shop, Oliver felt the familiar shifting begin. The Midnight Bookshop returning to its daytime state, folding in upon itself, becoming once more the small, apparently abandoned storefront that passers-by would see until the next night of keeping began. In his apartment, which remained unchanged regardless of the shop's transformations below, Oliver moved to the window and looked out it at Luminous Lane in the full light of morning. Somewhere out there, Elliot Gray was walking with new purpose, the absence around him filled once more with words, bridges spanning the void between himself and the one he had lost, between who he had been and who he might yet become. The Midnight Bookshop had worked its magic once again, and Oliver Knightwood, its keeper, had played his part in that magic, just as keepers had done for more than 2 centuries before him. It was enough. It was everything. With a contented sigh, he drew the heavy curtains against the morning light and prepared for rest. Tonight, the clock tower would chime once more for 1 o'clock, and the ritual of keeping would begin again. Who might find their way to the Midnight Bookshop? What books might call to them? What magic might unfold between forgotten volumes and seeking souls? The questions brought a smile to Oliver's lips as he settled into his bed. The Midnight Bookshop held endless possibilities, endless stories waiting to be discovered, and he, its keeper, would be there to witness them, one precious night at a time. As you settle deeper into comfort, the warm glow of the Midnight Bookshop begins to fade, the shelves blurring softly around the edges of your awareness. Oliver Knightwood's world grows quiet around you, a peaceful silence descending like a gentle blanket. Your breath moves in its own natural rhythm now, deep and slow. With each exhale, you feel yourself sinking a little further into relaxation, a little closer to the peaceful rest that awaits you. The image of the bookshop remains, a comforting presence in your mind. Those endless shelves of books, the soft, golden light from lamps and candles, the sense of possibility and magic that filled the air. So many stories waiting to be discovered. So many words waiting to connect one soul to another. Perhaps somewhere, in some forgotten corner of your dreams, tonight you might find your own midnight bookshop waiting for you. A place where the perfect book waits on a shelf, where golden light guides your path, where the keeper smiles in welcome and offers you tea as you explore. The characters you've met linger at the edges of your awareness. Oliver with his quiet wisdom and patience, Emma with her passion for preserving knowledge, Elliot finding his voice again after profound loss. Each found what they needed in that magical place where books hold more than just words on pages. Like them, you carry your own stories, your own words, spoken and unspoken, written and yet to be written. They form bridges between you and others, between your past and your future, between your waking mind and your dreaming one. These connections remain even as you drift towards sleep, invisible threads of language and meaning that hold your world together. The warmth that surrounded you in the Midnight Bookshop stays with you now, spreading through your body from the center outward. Your limbs feel pleasantly heavy, perfectly at rest. Your breathing continues its slow, steady rhythm, in and out, creating a gentle tide that carries you closer and closer to the shores of sleep. Let your mind return to your favourite moment from our journey tonight. Perhaps it was when Emma discovered the book that showed her a path forward, or when Elliot began to write again, filling the absence around him with words, or simply the image of Oliver walking among his beloved books, tending the magic of the Midnight Bookshop with quiet dedication. Hold that image gently in your mind as you continue to relax. There's no need to grasp it tightly. Just let it rest there, a soft focus for your attention as your thoughts begin to slow and settle. The Midnight Bookshop exists in that special place between wakefulness and dreams, between one state of being and another. As you cross that threshold now, moving from consciousness towards sleep, imagine that you carry with you a small golden key, like the one Oliver wore around his neck. It opens doors between worlds, between states of being, allowing you to move freely from one to another. Your body knows exactly how to make this journey. It has done so countless times before. All you need to do is continue breathing, continue letting go, continue allowing yourself to drift toward rest. The shelves of the Midnight Bookshop fade further from view now, the golden light dimming to a soft, distant glow. The stories you've heard tonight become part of you, woven into the fabric of your thoughts, ready to influence your dreams in gentle, positive ways. As you move deeper into relaxation, deeper into the space between consciousness and sleep, remember that you can return to the Midnight Bookshop whenever you wish, in your imagination, in your dreams, in that special twilight state between waking and sleeping. It waits for you, a sanctuary of stories, a haven of words, a place where magic still exists in quiet corners and between the pages of forgotten books. Your breathing has found its perfect rhythm now, slow and deep and comfortable. Your body feels wonderfully heavy, perfectly supported, completely at ease. Your mind grows quieter, thoughts slowing, becoming less distinct, more dreamlike. The keeper of the Midnight Bookshop would tell you that this transition, this crossing from one state to another, has its own special magic. It's a threshold, a liminal space where transformation happens, where old concerns are set aside and new possibilities emerge from the quietness. As you continue to drift, imagine turning the pages of your own book, a book that holds not just your past story, but all the stories you might yet live. Each page turns slowly, gently, revealing not words but soft impressions, feelings of peace and comfort and security that deepen with each breath you take. Soon, very soon, you'll cross fully into sleep. But for now, rest in this in-between place, this threshold state where the Midnight Bookshop's magic can still reach you, still surround you with its warm golden light and endless possibilities. Your breath flows in and out. Your body rests completely. Your mind drifts peacefully. The shelves of books stretch endlessly before you, their spines glowing softly in the warm light. These are not just any books, but dream books, sleep books, stories that unfold only when consciousness has slipped away and the deeper mind awakens to its own wisdom. The Midnight Bookshop keeper smiles and nods, gesturing toward a particularly comfortable reading nook where a single book lies waiting. Its cover is the exact colour of twilight, of that perfect moment between day and night. Its pages whisper as they turn, though no hand touches them. You feel yourself moving toward that book, drawn by gentle curiosity. As you approach, your body grows heavier, more comfortable, more completely at rest. Your breathing deepens, your thoughts slow further. The book opens, its pages close softly. Words form and dissolve. Stories begin. The golden light of the Midnight Bookshop surrounds you completely now, holding you in perfect comfort, perfect peace. The keeper watches from a distance, knowing you found exactly what you needed. The threshold between waking and sleeping, between one world and another. Your breath flows like gentle waves on a peaceful shore. Your body rests in perfect heaviness. Your mind drifts toward dreams. The Midnight Bookshop begins to transform around you, its countless books becoming stars in a night sky, its golden light becoming the soft glow of moonlight. You're floating now, perfectly supported, perfectly at ease, moving ever deeper into restful sleep. The keeper's voice comes to you one last time, gentle and reassuring. Rest now, dream well. The stories will be here when you return. Your breath flows slow and deep. Your body feels warm and heavy. Your mind grows quiet and still. The Midnight Bookshop fades into darkness. Sleep approaches on silent feet. Peace surrounds you completely. Rest now in perfect comfort. Dream well in perfect peace. Sleep deeply in perfect safety. Your journey to the Midnight Bookshop has ended for tonight, but the magic remains, surrounding you as you drift.